Hey guys, imagine strolling through a medieval castle on Christmas morning. Stick around, because what you think you know about holiday cheer in those ancient stone fortresses might just crumble. Spoiler alert, it wasn't exactly Santa's workshop, more like a giant, drafty, feast-fueled chaos wrapped in armor and rose windows. So, in the quiet hours of dawn, the stone-walled keep of Castle Ravenshallow sat still under a blanket of fresh snow. Its angle and rough-hewn stones softened by the pale light. Lady Aliner, wrapped in a heavy cloak, moved slowly through the chilly chamber, her breath swirling in the frigid air as she gestured to her retinue to gather by the hearth. Outside, the muffled crunch of footsteps in the snow echoed as the household arrived, some carrying simple bundles of bread and dried herbs, others bearing small candles flickering gently against the gray sky. The first touch of winter seemed to usher in a new tradition, one quietly observed at the edge of their routine lives, as the distant world remained indifferent to their holiday. As they assembled, the sense of purpose was only just beginning to take shape amid the slow comfort of shared silence. Each person quietly awaiting the day's unremarkable beginning. It was, after all, just another turning of the seasons, with no grand spectacle, only the soft hum of human presence, softened further by the cold and calm of the morning. As the morning stretched on, the atmosphere subtly shifted. Faint tensions flickered like candle flames in a draught, hinting at the careful choreography of this long-standing custom. Lady Aliner gently adjusted a woven wreath on the heavy oak table, her face shadowed but peaceful, while a few of the retainers mumbled over their lukewarm porridge about the likelihood of snow delaying the day's plan. The Lord, a man of measured words, confided in a servant about the need to reinforce the great hall's beams, as if protecting the celebration from the unpredictability of winter itself. Around them, the segmented hum of conversation wavered between the mundane and the meaningful, punctuated by the distant echo of the blacksmith's hammer or the distant call of a watchman. Here was a moment suspended, an uneasy lull before obvious chaos, yet oddly peaceful in its mundane rhythm, as everyone silently hoped for a quiet winter's day that might just transcend their human imperfections. A faint irony settled over the gathering as a servant accidentally knocked over a goblet, spilling wine onto a woolen blanket, an unintended splash that drew a quick, shuffling apology amid soft chuckles. The small mishap lingered in the air, much like the unspoken acknowledgement that even their careful plans carried the seeds of accidental absurdity. Lady Aliner, with a weary smile, dabbed at the stain with a rag, while the Lord shrugged and muttered something about the unpredictability of tradition, an ordinary chaos that somehow made the day more real. The blurred face of the image of a prophet, or some sacred figure, as yet unseen, flickered in the candlelight, as if hiding behind some shadow of their collective human folly. The household settled again, perhaps a little more aware that what they celebrated was as much about enduring imperfections as about marking the passage of time. And so, amidst this quiet irony, they returned to their chores, knitting together the fragile fabric of expected joy and inevitable mistake. Later in the day, the atmosphere grew remarkably still, as everyone found small comfort in routine, serving food, exchanging plain words, and sitting close by the warm hearth. The snow outside continued to fall steadily, muffling the distant sounds of a world that had long moved beyond their reach, leaving only this contained moment of shared ordinary life. The faces, now softened by the flickering firelight, seemed peaceful despite the slight weariness that shadowed their expressions, hidden behind veils of fatigue and quiet acceptance. Lady Aliner's fingers traced the carvings on a wooden bowl, her calm reflecting, perhaps, a quieter recognition that these transient human moments were their true tradition. Somewhere in the background, a minstrel's lute strings were silent, left unplayed, as the household sat in contemplative repose, their small rituals unfolding gently on the edge of time's relentless march. It was, finally, a place where stories paused, hearts slowed, and one could almost forget the tumult of life outside these stone walls. In the stillness of the evening, as shadows lengthened and the snow settled deeper, the household fell into a gentle, unspoken acknowledgement of their shared silence. The day had passed without drama, without grand spectacle, only the understated warmth of human presence amid their simple customs. Lady Aliner contemplated the flickering flames, the blurred faces nearby, and wondered softly about the meaning of tradition, less about divine celebration, more about the quiet endurance of human routine. The distant echo of footsteps on the cold stone, the faint hum of wind outside. These were the stories they carried now, little fragments of a day that would be quietly remembered, perhaps with a fond smile and a sigh of subdued amusement. In the calm, faded glow of dusk, they sat together, individually still and collectively at peace, sentient witnesses to another Christmas that was as humble and human as the stones beneath their feet. And just as the world outside seemed to slow, so too did they, in the gentle, sleepy silence that forever took the edge off history's unyielding march. As dawn's diffuse light seeped into the stone chambers, the castle's inhabitants began their quiet preparations for Christmas Day. Servants pulled down bundles of holly and mistletoe from high shelves, their rough fingers tracing the prickly leaves as they hung them above doorways and windows. The kitchens, warm with the scent of bread and roasting meats, echoed with the soft chatter of cooks smoothing out their morning routines and hunting for game, pheasants, rabbits, perhaps a mallard, and wondering if they would suffice for the day's modest feast. Outside, distant guards, in their chainmail shadows, listened to the faint sound of minstrels rehearsing carols, softly echoing through the courtyards. Decorations, simple yet deliberate, slowly transformed the functional interiors of the castle into something subtly festive, while the faces of prophets or saints remained unseen, blurred in faded paintings or hidden by flickering candlelight. The air was thick with a calm expectation, barely disturbed by the softness of footsteps and the faint crackling of fires being stoked anew for the coming feast. As midday approached, the atmosphere shifted subtly, with a quiet awareness settling over the castle's corridors. Something was amiss. Supplies of firewood, crucial for keeping the great hall warm and the cooking fires alive, grew scarce, and whispers of concern began to ripple through the servants' chambers. Meanwhile, a petty dispute arose over who should receive the grandest gift from the Lord, an ornate sword, or perhaps a richly embroidered cloak, each believing their claim justified. The tension was neither loud nor angry, but woven into lingering glances and hushed conversations, like the faint hum of a passing breeze. The minstrels, eager to lift spirits, continued their carol rehearsals, but even their melodies seemed tinged with a subtle irony. What was meant to be joyful now carried a faint undercurrent of unease. Amid this quiet discord, the unspoken question hovered. Would all be ready in time for the feast? Or would these small frictions cast a shadow over the celebration? By late afternoon, the irony of the situation settled quietly into the fabric of the day. The servants, despite their best efforts, found themselves tangled in the absurdity of their small disputes, arguing softly over who had the right to string the last sprig of holly, or to carry the heaviest load of firewood. The castle's interior, decorated with modest garlands and simple candles, looked a little more worn by the hour, as if amused by human stubbornness. The minstrels, caught in their rehearsals, began to include slightly off-key carols that folded into each other with a gentle humor. Outside, the cold air carried a faint sense that nature, indifferent and patient, watched the petty human dramas unfold. If the day had any true tension, it was a quiet acknowledgement that even in their most elaborate celebrations, humans managed to complicate the simplest of joys with minor disputes and unforeseen shortages. As dusk fell softly over the castle, an air of calm returned, as if the day's small tensions had gently ebbed away. Servants, having hurriedly located enough firewood and resolved their disputes over gifts, relaxed their shoulders and resumed their chores with a kind of quiet resignation. The hall was quietly set with hastily gathered decorations, and the sound of the minstrel's gentle strumming offered a soft reassurance that life persisted in its ordinary rhythms. The shadows grew longer behind the heavy curtains, while the faces of prophets or saints remained symbolically unseen, their presence more felt than seen, as if the very traditions of the season smiled quietly at human imperfection. There was a certain grace in the mundane, a recognition that the day's small conflicts had woven into the larger tapestry of the season's gentle, understated hope. Even the most fleeting moments of peace felt somehow more real in the quiet glow of the flickering candles. Later, as the castle settled into the restful stillness of night, the day's minor dramas faded into memory, nothing more than quiet stories told by shadows and fading candlelight. The servants, the guards, the minstrels, all of them, in their own modest ways, had contributed to a day that was neither perfect nor particularly extraordinary. It was simply a human echo of tradition, with all its small absurdities and sincere hopes. Reflecting now, one might see the quiet humor in their attempts to celebrate amid shortages and disputes, recognizing that Christmas, after all, was less about grandeur and more about finding moments of calm among the chaos. The old stones of the castle, dark and silent now, seemed to hum with a gentle patience, a reminder that even the most elaborate human rituals rest in the slow, enduring rhythm of everyday life. And so, beneath the cold, indifferent stars, the castle lingered in its quiet sleep, awaiting another day to unfold, imperfect and warmly human once more. As dawn's pale light seeped through the narrow shutters of the castle chambers, the inhabitants prepared for a Christmas day that promised quiet tradition. Servants stoked the hearths, and the lord of the manor strolled through the stone corridors, his footsteps muffled against cold flagstones. Outside, a gentle, lingering frost coated the battlements and the distant woods, reminding everyone that winter's quiet grip had yet to loosen. The grand hall awaited its customary decorations, and in the quiet hum of routine, there was a faint sense of anticipation, an unspoken acknowledgement of another year passing peacefully enough. And yet, beneath this calm lay an ordinary human expectancy, a sense that something subtle might disrupt the stillness, subtly reminding them of life's small unpredictabilities. As the day pressed on, a fierce blizzard arose unexpectedly, swirling snow into the air and stripping away the clear sky. The castle's windows rattled with the wind, and the thick stone walls seemed to shudder under the weight of the cold. Servants hurried to secure shutters, whispering about how the storm might trap them, perhaps even until after Christmas, when the roads beyond would be impassable. Suspense grew quietly among the inhabitants, their normal routines interrupted by the relentless roar of wind and the whiteness looming at every corner. The storm, with its silent, persistent force, cast a slow, inevitable shadow over the castle's festivities, hinting at the fragile boundary between order and chaos that winter so subtly enforced. Meanwhile, in the dimly lit cellars and candlelit corridors, the prized silver candlesticks, normally gleaming under the feasts, were suddenly noticed to be missing. An ironic stillness settled over the servants as they carefully retraced their steps, but no trace of the delicate holders was found. The moment struck a gentle absurdity. Amid serious concerns about the storm and dinner plans, a petty theft had slipped quietly into their shared consciousness. Irony hung softly in the air, as a theft that seemed so trivial compared to the howling wind became a tiny, unspoken puzzle in the midst of the unfolding storm. And in this subtle disruption, the castle's calm facade remained, quietly amused by human imperfections that persisted despite the season's solemnity. That evening, with the blizzard still howling outside and the missing candlesticks a silent puzzle, the castle's cook improvised with what little was left from the stockpiles: dried fruits, pickled vegetables, and stale bread, arranging a modest feast upon rough-hewn tables. The flickering candlelight cast long, soft shadows as the residents gathered around, exchanging quiet, unpretentious smiles. The sense of idle desperation became a gentle calm as everyone accepted the humble feast and the imperfect setting, finding comfort in simple togetherness. The storm outside persisted, but inside, the warm hum of subdued conversation and the faint clatter of everyday life settled the moment into gentle routine. It was yet another reminder that human efforts often danced betwixt intention and improvisation, especially on days like these. As night fell, casting a deep, restful quiet over the castle, the inhabitants leaned into the slow rhythm of the evening, their faces blurred by flickering candlelight, unseen but present. The storm's fury waned into a distant mutter, and the missing candlesticks seemed a minor detail amid the peaceful, drifting sleep. Reflecting on the day, one could see how life persisted in its ordinary, slightly ironic way. Human plans disrupted, small thefts unnoticed, and hearty patience sustained through simple routines. The silent, enduring stone walls whispered stories of countless Christmas days past, all sharing this same quiet rhythm of imperfection and repose. And so, as the castle settled into its deep, uneventful slumber, it quietly acknowledged the steady, unheralded magic of human endurance and the soft humor tucked within everyday life. As the cold dusk settled over the stone walls of the castle, the familiar routines of preparation began. Candles were lit, rough-hewn tables laid with simple food, and faint murmurs echoed through the great hall. The chamber was dim and smoky, filled with the scent of baked bread and roasted meats. Yet there was a quiet anticipation hanging in the air, as if everyone sensed that tonight might hold something special, though none dared to voice it aloud. Servants moved like slow shadows, their footsteps quiet and deliberate, while some of the castle's inhabitants, wrapped in threadbare cloaks, looked out through small windows at the darkening sky, waiting for midnight with folded hands. It was the kind of evening that felt both ordinary and slightly tense, as if the very walls remembered centuries of similar nights, each one quietly holding its secrets. Just before the hour, the flickering of candles cast soft shadows that danced like gentle ghosts, calming the restless minds of those assembled. As the clock neared midnight, a gentle stillness crept into the castle, and the first sign of the night's unusual quiet appeared, an unexpected hush that seemed to blanket everything, even the distant howling of the wind. The doors to the chapel, usually heavy and slow, swung open with an almost inaudible creak, revealing a sliver of moonlight spilling across the stone floor. People gathered closer, faces blurred by flickering candle flames, their eyes fixed on the dark entrance, waiting for the moment that felt both familiar and slightly absurd, waiting for a miracle that might come from nowhere. At that instant, the harsh blizzard that had battered the castle all day seemed to ease, as if cheekily pausing to witness what was to come, leaving a strange, peaceful silence in its wake. The lost candlesticks, which had mysteriously gone missing just days before, now reappeared on the altar without explanation, as if they had simply been waiting for the right time to return. With a quiet sense of irony, the gathered guests watched as the faint glow of the moon traced intricate patterns across the stone walls, and a subtle hum seemed to fill the air, an ancient, unintentional hymn sung softly by the wind and the shadows. The flickering candles, suddenly steadier, cast gentle light upon faces that seemed both expectant and mildly disinterested, as if humans had seen their share of miracles and weren't particularly startled anymore. The faces of prophets and sacred figures remained unseen, hidden behind blurs of light or shadow, suggesting that perhaps the divine played its part in the mundane. As always, with unintentional humor, somewhere in the background, a servant subtly sighed, acknowledging the strange beauty of an event that was as much routine as it was remarkable. Life, after all, tended to carry on with a quiet dignity, even during moments meant for miracles. As the night deepened, the ambience transitioned into one of calm acceptance. The small congregation sat quietly, the soft murmur of voices now replaced by the gentle crackle of candles, and the distant, muffled sound of falling snow. The sense of tension had dissolved into a lull of simple human wonder, people simply listening, waiting for the hymn that might or might not rise from the shadows. The faint glow of dawn felt distant, and the shadows on the walls seemed to soften, as if they, too, had grown tired from witnessing centuries of silent nights. The blurred images of prophets and the ghostly flicker of candle flames seemed to dance in a sameness that was soothing, not alarming. In that slow, unhurried moment, the castle's inhabitants pondered how little it takes for a night to become a story worth telling, one filled with ordinary miracles and quiet ironies. In the gentle light of morning, the castle's chapel stood still, unaltered by the midnight's quiet spectacle. The candles had burned low, and the lost candlesticks had vanished as mysteriously as they had appeared, leaving only faint traces of melted wax on the altar. The faithful, now yawning and stretching, carried on with their daily routines, carrying the memory of that miraculous hymn. No grand spectacle, just a peaceful reminder of the small, sometimes unnoticed ways in which life persists and surprises, even in the most tired of nights. The blurred faces of prophets remained in the shadows, unseen and unremarked, amid a world that simply moved on. Outside, the snow was lighter, and the dawn cast a soft orange hue over the stone battlements, whispering of another day that, like all days, would quietly fade into the next. And somewhere within it all, the castle settled into its calm, knowing that miracles, if they existed, were just like the dawn, understated, slow, and often overlooked. As dawn gently crept over the stone battlements of Ravenshallow, the castle lay quiet under a thin layer of frost, its windows glowing softly with the warm light of hearths below. Servants and household members moved slowly, the stillness in the corridors echoing a shared sense of expectation that Christmas had finally arrived, an occasion marked more by rhythmic routines than by grand celebration. The day began wrestled with the sluggish awakening of tired limbs and the faint sound of a distant bell, calling everyone to a quiet meal, a pause in their daily labors. The air was crisp, tinged with the scent of melting snow and stale fire, as children shuffled in worn slippers, eager yet subdued. Somewhere in the shadows, a prophet's face was hidden, unknown and unseen, as if the season's quiet mirth was shared among many invisible watchers. By midday, the castle's great hall had become a tableau of modest exchange. A handful of hand-carved wooden toys, bits of coarse cloth, and small loaves wrapped in scraps of linen. Tensions that had lingered in silent corners, perhaps over land or favor, seemed to soften as old grievances were set aside in the gentle spirit of the season. An ancient noblewoman, her eyes half closed in gentle amusement, handed a simple gift of dried fruit to a servant who had once been her apprentice. Between sips of sour wine and bites of stale bread, voices carried small, ironic jokes about the absurdities of courtly life, evoking soft laughter that sounded more like a collective exhalation. Among the quiet, unseen prophet, his features blurred by shadows, the feeling was that Christmas was less a feast and more a collective exhale in the midst of ongoing human imperfection. Yet in the peaceful conviviality, an old irony persisted, the idea that the season's unity was fragile, easily shattered by disputes over properties or petty pride. A well-meaning lord attempted to bring harmony by giving a token gift to a rival, only to realize the gesture was received with a raised eyebrow or a slight smile tinged with sarcasm. The children poked at their simple presents, their faces a mixture of boredom and mild amusement, as grand plans for festivities faded into quiet acceptance. In the faint orange glow of the fading firelight, the prophet's face remained hidden, his unseen presence a reminder of the unspoken truths woven through the genuine but flawed human interactions. It was a day marked more by the subtle play of human folly and grace than by any grand gesture. As twilight approached, the castle grew still once more, the hum of voices settling into a gentle calm. The heavy wooden doors closed softly, and the flicker of candles cast long, slow shadows across the stone walls. The people, weary but content, retreated to their chambers, or gathered quietly around small fires, whispering stories that barely stirred the air to them. The day had revealed a simple, enduring truth, that peace, however fragile, could be found in small acts and shared silence. The prophet's face remained hidden, as if retreating into the shadows to ponder the quiet absurdities of human life. Outside, the winter world continued its slow, indifferent march below a blanket of stars, feeling distant yet aware of this tiny moment of respite, a fragile Christmas amid the endless cycle. In a final, unspoken consensus of the heart, the castle settled into a quiet hope, the kind that lingers in shadows and memory, a hope for better days yet to come, or perhaps simply for the patience to endure life's small absurdities. The season's true gift, it seemed, was in these moments of calm acceptance of old grievances, of imperfect gifts, of unseen prophets with blurred faces, and of ourselves. As the night deepened and silence folded over Ravenshallow, the people dreamed softly, carrying forward the faint, ironic comfort that even in posturing and petty disputes, there was a shared human rhythm, sluggish, yet steady in its quiet persistence. And somewhere beyond the sleeping castle, the winter moon watched silently, as if smiling at the slow, gentle persistence of human hope. As the first gentle snowflakes began to drift down, Lord Alaric watched the travelers cross the frozen drawbridge with a quiet sense of routine, their cloaks and boots leaving faint marks on the icy surface. The castle gates opened slowly, and the warm glow from within flickered softly against the cold, inviting the weary in. Lady Merwin moved among the bustling preparation rooms, her face partially shadowed, overseeing trays of roasted meats and baked breads earned from long hours of quiet effort. The minstrel sat nearby, tuning his lute with a soft, repetitive motion, his eyes half closed, as if already lulled by the season's calm. Outside, the wind whispered past stone walls, reminding all of winter's slow approach, and the quiet harmony of yet another gathering to mark the year's end. However, beneath the soft hum of daily activity, Brother Tomas, the season's steward, leaned closer to a flickering candle and warned that a blizzard was gathering on the horizon. Its arrival could threaten the very sustenance of the feast. His voice was low, careful, almost amused by the irony of winter's unpredictable patience. Lady Merwin paused, glancing upward as if the storm might already be listening, her worry subtle but present. The lute player hesitated, finger on the strings, sensing the shift in mood, while others went about their tasks with slightly more haste, exchanging glances that bore the weight of small uncertainties. The castle's ancient stones seemed to listen, unspoken questions hanging in the crisp air, as the festive preparations hung in delicate balance despite the looming threat. A faint, almost humorous sense of irony settled in. Here they were, faces lit by flickering candlelight, all somewhat resigned to human frailty and winter's indifferent timing. The steward's cautious words contrasted against the cheerful callers of celebratory anticipation that still decorated the halls. The minstrel, pausing his tuning, let out a slow, amused sigh, as if serenading the absurdity of planning amid the unpredictable elements. Lady Merwin's composure remained amiable, her movements slow and deliberate, as if silently accepting that all decisions were made in this small theater of declining daylight and rising doubt. Perhaps, she reasoned, all that could be done was to hope for the best and prepare for whatever winter had yet to unfold. As the snow continued to fall softly outside, the atmosphere in the castle softened into a quiet patience, an acceptance of nature's slow, unstoppable rhythm. The wind's moan was barely audible now, blending with the gentle crackle of the hearth fires inside. The guests, already inside, settled into their seats, exchanging mild, sleepy conversations, their faces relaxed, but with a trace of uncertainty lingering beneath small smiles. Lady Merwin found a quiet moment to lean against a rough wooden pillar, her gaze distant yet calm, contemplating the quiet inevitability of the storm that was coming. Outside, the snow blanketed the grounds in a peaceful white, casting a muted, timeless silence over the castle, as if summing up the many small human worries tucked away in that still winter night. In the end, the scene was one of gentle resilience, humans gathering in the face of the cold, their worries and hopes intertwined, set against the unyielding honesty of winter's slow passage. Lord Alaric, watching the flicker of shadows cast by the firelight, seemed to accept the quiet truth that every gathering carried its unwritten hesitations and understated ironies. The storm, perhaps, was less a threat and more a reminder of nature's quiet, relentless carelessness, a pause in the ongoing story of human effort and frailty. As everyone settled more deeply into the night, with warm cups of ale and murmured plans, there was a faint, collective understanding that these peaceful, mundane moments were enough, proof of human persistence amid the unpredictability of winter's slow, patient watch. As the early evening light seeped into the stone corridors of the castle, the kitchens buzzed with a quiet, determined energy. Master Chef Rowan, with his slow-moving hands and steady gaze, examined the empty space where the rare sack of winter spices once sat, his brow lightly creased by mild disappointment. His young apprentice, Elise, hovered nearby, eyes flickering with nervous hope and unspoken concern about her role in the upcoming feast. In a corner, the castle's alchemist lingered softly, whispering of a mysterious silver leaf, its edges shimmering in the flickering torchlight, promising perhaps a secret to elevate the banquet beyond ordinary fare. The clock's gentle ticking seemed to underscore the weight of the moment, as everyone sensed that small ingredients could mean the difference between a decent meal and legend. As minutes stretched on, the tension between Rowan and Elise grew subtler, but no less palpable, each trying to conceal their concern behind a veneer of patience. Rowan's voice, when he finally spoke, was calm, but edged with weariness, urging her to explain how the spice had vanished so suddenly. Yet Elise hesitated, symbolic of her youthful uncertainty. Meanwhile, outside the bustling kitchen, Brother Tomas scurried through the woods, hands clutching a slender, leafy herb that he hoped would suffice as a substitute. Despite its uncertain origins, the castle's alchemist, meanwhile, kept whispering about the silver leaf, a rare ingredient shrouded in legend, which might or might not turn the humble feast into something remotely memorable. With each passing moment, the pressure mounted, not so much from words, but from the unspoken fear of falling short in a moment doomed to be remembered. The irony of it all was quietly evident. Ingredients so crucial that they might define a feast, yet fragile enough to vanish under the softest distraction or the lightest mishandling. Rowan, inspecting the empty sack again, shook his head gently, the corners of his mouth twitching in faint acknowledgement of the absurdity. How easily something so small could complicate such a grand occasion. Elise, with her hands nervously clasped in front of her, offered a faint smile at her own misfortune, her youthful face soft and unfocused under the shifting lantern glow. The alchemist, eyes partially hidden in shadow, seemed more amused than worried, muttering about the silver leaf as if it were a simple matter of time. The castle, in its quietness, felt both heavy with expectation and gently resigned to the slow, unchanging rhythm of small human struggles. Eventually, a calm settled over the bustling chaos, an acceptance that perhaps the feast would be modest, but honest and true to its humble beginnings. Rowan's shoulders relaxed slightly as he began to assemble the ingredients that remained, and Elise, taking a slow breath, moved with gentle purpose, her earlier anxiety giving way to quiet resolve. Brother Tomas returned empty-handed, but he carried a peaceful smile, knowing some things in nature are unpredictable, and yet quietly enough to be accepted in their own time. The alchemist, in a rare moment of stillness, simply observed, his face blurred in the soft light, as if recognizing the quiet poetry in human imperfection. In this moment, the castle held no need for legend, only the simple, enduring truth of shared effort and the slow passage of small human stories. Later, as the castle's banquet slowly filled with the scent of roasted meats and warm bread, the slow realization settled sometimes. The stories worth remembering are not about the ingredients or the legends, but about the gentle patience that underpins every simple step. Rowan offered a small, acknowledged nod at Elise, their shared humility quietly stitched into the fabric of the evening. The mysterious silver leaf, if it was ever real, remained an unverified whisper in the shadows, much like the unseen faces of prophets under a faint, obscuring light present, yet forever hidden. In the quiet, the castle felt remarkably at peace, wrapped in the calm that only time and acceptance can bring. As the first guests arrived, and the ordinary feast unfolded quietly under the watching evening sky. On a chilly winter evening, the great hall gradually filled with the soft murmurs of arriving nobles. Their cloaks rustled softly, and distant footsteps echoed faintly against stone, while flickering torches cast warm, uneven glows on tapestries and long oak tables. Courtiers and servants moved with quiet purpose, arranging plates of bread and ale as the moment of gathering drew near. Amid this gentle chaos, the air held a faint scent of roasted meats and spiced wine, blending with the subtle anticipation of strangers united by tradition. It was an ordinary scene, people coming together in a modest ritual of festivity, each carrying silent stories beneath their composed faces. As the evening wore on, the doors opened wider, revealing figures arriving from distant realms, each with intentions that rippled beneath their courteous facades. A disgraced knight, his armor dulled and shoulders burdened, hesitated before stepping inside, seeking some fragile hope for redemption amid unfamiliar faces. Nearby, a foreign envoy, eyes fixed carefully on the host, subtly probed for alliances, perhaps a marriage that might secure their influence or peace. Somewhere in a shadowed corner, a cloaked wanderer whispered rumors to a small group, voice low, but clear enough to suggest that the king's displeasure lingered, unseen yet heavy in the air. The room grew crowded with layers of quiet tension, as each guest's purpose tucked itself into the shadows of camaraderie and suspicion alike. A faint irony rested in the way the court's conversations unfolded, discussions about alliances, treachery, and loyalty that hovered just at the edge of politeness, often slipping into quiet jest or distracted distraction. The disgraced knight, for all his efforts to appear composed, occasionally tensed at an unintended word or glance. Meanwhile, the foreign envoy's gaze lingered a little too long on the ring finger of a noble lady, their silent thoughts betraying a hope for a union more personal than political. The rumors from the cloaked stranger persisted, weaving through the conversations like a delicate thread of suspicion, their source seemingly as unknown as the missing spice that still haunted the court's dark corners. The scene teetered deliciously between order and quiet chaos, with everyone holding something back, aware of the fragile balance they maintained with thinly veiled irony. As the night deepened, the hall settled into a gentle calm. The clink of goblets, the rustle of fabric, and the muted laughter of the less serious momentarily masked the underlying tensions. The disgraced knight, having exchanged formal pleasantries, leaned back with a soft sigh, a faint smile flickering at the corners of his mouth, a rare moment of quiet acceptance. The foreign envoy, now absorbed in a game of chess with a young noble, appeared less like an outsider and more like a contemplative player in an ancient game, the details fading into the background of the busy room. The whispers of discontent about the missing spice drifted into a minor, forgotten hum as shadows grew longer and the fire's glow waned. In this gentle lull, the court seemed to breathe a collective sigh, aware, perhaps, that chaos often lurks just beneath the surface of calm. Later, as dawn's faint light crept beneath the heavy curtains, the hall stood silent and still, records of the night etched quietly into memory. The guests had departed, leaving behind only faint traces, smudged wine stains, crumpled napkins, and the dull warmth of shared moments now dissolved into the air. The disgraced knights, resolved to seek humility, lingered like the lingering scent of burned candles, quietly shaping future boundaries. The envoy's eyes had perhaps turned from intrigue to reflection, contemplating the quiet cost of influence. The mysterious rumors and the missing spice remained unresolved, tucked away like faded photographs, mysterious, insignificant, yet undeniably part of this peaceful, mundane tradition. So the hall, once lively with subtle purpose and layered silent stories, settled into the slow, unremarkable rhythm of sleep and memory. As the evening waned and the candles flickered softly in the stone halls, the grand banquet had begun to settle into its gentle rhythm. Plates of warm, golden pies were passed from hand to hand, their flaky edges catching the low light, while mugs of spiced mead offered a faint warmth deep in the chest. The long-awaited silver leaf garnish blinked faintly on a centerpiece, shimmering like frost on a windowpane, an unintended touch of winter's hush within the bustling room. Outside, a quiet wind whispered against the thick oak shutters, hinting at the storm that lurked just beyond the wall's embrace. The room, filled with muted laughter and soft footsteps, felt both lively and distant, as if time itself paused for this humble tradition. There was a shared sense of purpose, a fleeting thankfulness for simple pleasures amid the turn of the year. Suddenly, the low hum of conversation was broken by a sharp gust that rattled the shutters and darkened the flickering flames, casting long, uncertain shadows over the buffet. A figure, cloaked and hesitant, entered through the heavy door, his presence stirring a quiet tension among the tables. He carried with him a message, restrained in tone, but carrying weight, and a strange, hurried urgency. Servants paused mid-pour, eyes flicking between host and messenger, as if the wind had slipped whispers of mischief through the cracks. A poorly concealed worry flickered across faces briefly touched with familiarity, while the merriment outside faltered under the chill of suspicion. The festive mask was beginning to crack, revealing the fragile human fears beneath the veneer of feasts and celebration. In the midst of this sudden tension, a peculiar irony seemed to unfurl as the true cause of disquiet emerged. A missing spice, once thought to be a simple ingredient, now turned into a symbol of betrayal. The messenger, eyes shadowed by the flickering candlelight, revealed that the spice had not vanished by accident, but had been found in the hands of the disgraced knight, who now looked unusually subdued. There was a faint, almost humorous irony in the fact that a small jar of spice would steer the course of a grand feast's quiet collapse. The knight, face partly obscured by a thick beard and a cloak, lowered his eyes and offered the ingredient as atonement, a tangible sign of regret. The room, once full of warmth and anticipation, now hummed softly with the gentle hum of human imperfection and unforeseen folly. As the storm outside continued in its quiet stubbornness, the atmosphere inside gradually found a peaceful rhythm again, softened by the mundane acknowledgement of mistakes and the bland comfort of forgiveness. The spice was returned, and the awkwardness was woven into the fabric of the night, becoming just another story in the slow, unending scroll of feasts and follies. Candles burned low, and the flickering dance of their flames seemed to whisper how easily human plans could falter, yet still carry on. Conversations resumed in hushed tones, perhaps with a little more caution, but also with a quiet sense that life's small disasters were merely details in the larger, slow tapestry of tradition. Outside, the wind continued its restless wandering, indifferent to the human dramas unfolding beneath it. Later, as the evening drew to a close and the last of the candles guttered out, the hall grew still, filled with the faint echo of laughter and the rustling of departing cloaks. The night, heavy with the scent of spiced mead and melted wax, seemed to hold a gentle, enduring patience, reminding one that even in the grandest of moments, human weakness and humility quietly persisted. The king's emissary, having fulfilled his silent duty, left behind a room full of softly smiling faces, each carrying their own small stories of human imperfection. In the quiet aftermath, the true warmth lingered not in the gilded pies or sparkling frost, but in the shared acknowledgement that no feast was perfect, and perhaps that was enough. Outside, the wind sighed again, tired and unhurried, as the castle settled into its peaceful, sleepy stillness. As the winter storm finally receded, the stones of the castle seemed to breathe a little easier, their ancient surfaces echoing faintly with the quiet hum of returning life. Guests began to gather around worn oak tables, the flickering firelight casting long, sleepy shadows across faces that had aged into gentle, expectant expressions. There was a subtle sense that this gathering marked an end, a tentative pause after days of uncertainty, with the faint aroma of roasted meats and spiced bread drifting through the cool air. The familiar sounds of idle conversation and soft laughter created a fragile warmth, almost like a shared secret between old stone walls. In this calm, the fragile human effort to find normalcy persisted, unremarked by the distant snow falling outside, silent and relentless. Yet beneath the surface, a slow tension lingered, an unspoken acknowledgement that the peace was temporary, that wounds beyond the visible still needed tending. The castle's chamberlain, nervously adjusting his tunic, shuffled through a list of loyal knights and borrowed stories of bravery, some perhaps exaggerated, some real, trying to fill the space with a semblance of collective pride. Lord Alaric, his face deep in shadow, raised a goblet that caught the meager candlelight, offering a quiet toast to endurance rather than triumph. Eyes shadowed and distant, the hall's warmth contrasted sharply with the icy weight of the past day's chaos, reminding everyone that even the grandest of moments could be tempered by the slow, inevitable pull of consequence. The air felt thick with quiet irony. Survival was the only victory worth acknowledging today. Amid the subdued murmurs, a small moment of irony emerged. Elise, the castle's unassuming cook, plopped a hearty chunk of bread onto a plate. Her hands, steady despite the faint flicker of exhaustion in her posture. Her simple, well-worn apron bore the faint stains of countless meals. Yet tonight it felt like her quiet contribution was the most lasting victory of all. A muted round of applause rippled through the room, not for heroism or grandeur, but for a humble feast prepared under difficult circumstances. The knight, once dishonored, now sat uncomfortably among friends, clearly trying not to meet eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and awkwardness. These small ironies, tucked into the fabric of the night, softening the harsh edges of conflict with mundane resilience, made the gathering feel oddly human, imperfect, real, and quietly enduring. As the evening wore on, the hall settled into a gentle hush, the candle flames flickering in rhythm with slow, measured breaths. Outside, the snow continued its quiet fall, a gentle blanketing that seemed to mute the last echoes of discord. Lord Alaric's voice, when he spoke again, was calm and measured, acknowledging not only the hardships endured, but also the fragile thread of unity that persisted among them all. The gathering, with its imperfect stories, faint humor, and lingering fatigue, became a tableau of muted hope, an unspoken agreement that peace, however fragile, deserved to be honored, even if only for a night. This was the quiet victory, the slow, patient weaving together of stories relationships, and the faint, stubborn light of shared human connection. In the dying moments of the night, a collective stillness settled over the castle, like a gentle exhale after a long, uncertain breath. The guests, now quietly mindful of the years to come, lingered for a while longer over their simple fare, their faces soft with contentment and fatigue. As they gradually dispersed, each carried with them a subtle sense of belonging, simple, imperfect, yet undeniably real. The castle's ancient stones, bearing witness to yet another quiet chapter, seemed to hum with the faint imprint of these human hours, moments stitched together by mundane acts of kindness, forgiveness, and patience. And so, in this slow, unremarkable way, the realm was momentarily woven into a faintly legendary tapestry of endurance, quietly waiting for whatever would come next. In the quiet shadows of Eldermere's stone walls, Lady Althea and Brother Rowan gathered beneath a low, flickering torchlight, their whispered plans unfolding amidst the scent of aged parchment and cold stone. They centered their thoughts on the approaching winter solstice, an ancient occasion where the longest night of the year held both fear and reverence. The castle's hall was filled with a soft anticipation, as if even the stones listened patiently to their quiet deliberation. Outside, the wind brushed softly against the narrow windows, adding a hushed rhythm to their careful plotting, mindful of traditions that had long shaped the castle's calendar. It was a meeting rooted in small hopes that their pagan customs would subtly survive amid the courtly routines, and a shared sense that, at least for now, human rituals persisted amid the relentless march of time. As they moved closer to planning the festivities, tension seeped into the air, born of competing expectations. Lady Althea's desire to honor the old ways, and the court's increasingly Christian veneer demanding a more subdued celebration. Their conversation wove through questions of ritual. Should they light a single ceremonial fire or multiple small lamps, each choice echoing differing ideas about tradition and propriety? Brother Rowan's face was often obscured in shadow, his voice a faint murmur that seemed both distant and intimate, whispering of ancient echoes lost in the formal rituals. The castle's servants moved quietly, carrying in bowls of dried herbs and candles, as if participating in a silent, private debate of their own. The conflict, quiet yet persistent, reflected the subtle irony that even sacred rites had become entangled with the mundane expectations of courtly life. In the slow hours that followed, irony softly settled within the space. How a sacred tradition could be so easily turned into a delicate performance, with Lady Althea adjusting her gown as if to hide her amusement. The winter feast preparation was underway. But beneath the surface, there was an unspoken acknowledgement that many of these ancient rites might be diluted or transformed, kept alive more in symbolic gestures than true belief. The flickering candlelight cast gentle shadows on the hurriedly assembled decorations, sprigs of holly and sprigs of speculation, each jab of color a muted nod to ancient practices. Brother Rowan's quiet smile betrayed a certain humility as he watched the castle's inhabitants shape their ceremonies like soft clay. Yet somehow, that was enough. In these subtle, imperfect acts, the old and new worlds gently collided, a testament to human resilience and modest hopes. As the evening settled, the castle seemed to exhale its accumulated quiet, the tense edges of the day softening into a calm acceptance. Lady Althea and Brother Rowan shared a rare, unspoken understanding that sometimes the most sacred rituals were not grand or perfect, but simply persistent, layered softly into the everyday fabric of life. They lingered in the silent moments, observing servants adjusting lamps, children peering curiously at the strange ritual objects, and the distant, muffled sound of the wind through the stone corridors. The ritual of the winter solstice, faintly echoing through the centuries, seemed both fragile and enduring, wrapped in the mundane routines of castle life. They understood, amid the slow passage of days, that tradition was less about the purity of each act and more about the quiet gesture of remembering. And in that gentle understanding, there was a subtle peace, a recognition of human imperfection as part of the sacred process. Later, as darkness fully cloaked Eldermere, the castle rested in a gentle silence, the glow of the prepared candles flickering softly against stone walls. Lady Althea sat quietly by the window, reflecting on the modest success of their efforts, while Brother Rowan regarded the scene with a distant, peaceful gaze, faces obscured by flickering shadows, as if unseen prophets watching from the margins. They acknowledged that these traditions, woven into the fabric of the castle's life, would continue in small, imperfect ways, resilient against the erosion of time and expectation. The stories they envisioned, the quiet, slow ceremonies, becoming part of the gentle fabric of winter's heart. In this tranquil moment, with the cold settling outside and warmth within, they appreciated the slowly unfolding truth that sacred acts often reside in the overlooked, in the mundane, yet meaningful acts. It was, after all, enough to simply be present, quietly remembering, as one season gently gives way to another. Beneath the grand oak beams of the castle's great hall, Eric's quiet exploration revealed a narrow, dust-choked stairwell that seemed to fade into shadow. An ordinary curiosity turned peculiar discovery. As he descended, The air grew cooler and still, the faint scent of old wood and centuries of silence pressing in. There, hidden behind a loose stone, was a small door, unassuming yet oddly inviting, leading to a forgotten chamber. Inside, on a wooden stand, lay a harp, its strings dull and cracked, as if waiting patiently for some small act of recognition. It was an oddly mundane moment, finding a piece of broken music equipment tucked away in the dark. Yet somehow, it felt as if the past had blinked awake, observing him with a quiet patience. With gentle insistence, Eric arranged to have the harp cleaned and the strings replaced, a task marked by slow, careful movements and half-hearted hopes. The castle's steward, an aging man with a tired smile, watched from time to time, as if the object's silence was a matter of silent reverence or mild amusement. Days passed in the ordinary flow of maintenance, and slowly the worn strings were tuned, each vibration tentative but persistent. Still, the instrument's voice was faint, uncertain, like a whisper from an incomplete story, an irony not lost on those who thought only of castles as places of grandeur, rather than dusty relics clinging to long-departed melodies. Nightfall brought only quiet, gray shadows, but somewhere within, the harp seemed to stir slightly, waiting to find its lost tune. One evening, as the last amber light slipped through narrow, iron-caged windows, Eric hesitated before the harp, contemplating whether it was worth the effort to coax out any sound at all. The strings hummed, tense and fragile under his touch, but produced a delicate, hesitant note, an oddly mundane act that felt almost humorous in its banality. The castle steward chuckled softly at the surprising modesty of such an old instrument, whispering that perhaps it was never meant to sing loudly, only to remind living ears of forgotten times. Irony settled into the cool air, an instrument centuries old, capable of only faint whispers, yet capable of stirring echoes long thought silenced. The moment felt shared, a modest act, infused with quiet reverence, and just enough humor at human weakness. From that night onward, Eric and the steward returned to their routine, tending the harp gently and occasionally strumming small, simple melodies that drifted through shadowed corners of the castle. The faint, ghostly melodies seemed to settle into the grain of the old wood, blending with the layers of silence. The castle's vast hall retained its echoes of laughter and whispering feet, but beneath it, an invisible undercurrent of hope persisted, an acknowledgement of the small miracles in mundane, honest effort. As days stretched into unremarkable weeks, the harp's silent beauty became a quiet fixture, like a mild, familiar presence, steadiness amid the slow passing of seasons. In this way, the instrument's dormant hum persisted, not quite lost, not entirely heard, just waiting quietly for another chance to stir. Looking back, Eric understood that some things, like old instruments, forgotten songs, or even human confidence, rest patiently, waiting for gentle care and the patience to listen. The harp, once a mere object of curiosity, had become a symbol of silent resilience, reminding him that hope often whispers in the smallest of sounds. Perhaps, in the slow cadence of daily life, it was enough to simply be present, aware, and quietly appreciative of the echoes of human effort that linger beneath the surface of things. As he left the chamber that evening, the faintest vibration still lingered in the air, a humble testament to the invisible, enduring melodies that life quietly preserves, even amidst the everyday absurdities of decay and forgetfulness. In the quiet dawn of a cold winter day, the castle's great hall was filled not with anticipation of the usual festive rites, but with the soft, steady noise of villagers arriving through the thick, creaking doors. The hearths flickered with a subdued glow, casting warm shadows over the simple bread and modest candles they brought. As everyone quietly observed the tradition that linked them through centuries, it was a day designated for sacred acts and shared devotion, a moment of solemnity amid the ordinary routines. Outside, snow fell silently, piling up against stone walls that seemed to breathe and hold onto stories of times long past. The air was cold, but thick with the scent of old wood and hope, fragile yet persistent in its simplicity. As midday approached, a sudden storm wrapped the castle in a restless, swirling white veil, turning the familiar landscape into uncertain silence. The heavy flurry of snow rendered travel impossible, and the castle's doors had to remain closed, trapping the villagers and nobility alike inside. It was then that the noble lords hesitated, their eyes flickering with a mixture of annoyance and concern, as they realized their opulent feast would need to fold into the quiet necessity of shelter. Meanwhile, the villagers, often used to small sacrifices, began to gather closer, their devotion steadfast, but visibly strained by the clash of their humble piety and the grandeur that surrounded them. The moment stretched, thick with the tension of unspoken questions about what truly mattered in such unexpected stillness. Despite the solemnity, irony lingered softly like a shadow. Here was everyone, united by the storm, yet divided by their different expectations of the day's meaning. The nobles, with their fine cloth and ancestral cups, debated whether to proceed with their lavish rites or embrace the simplicity that the weather imposed. The villagers, meanwhile, looked on with quiet humor, half amused, half resigned, as the rituals were slowly adapted. They exchanged glances that, in a more mundane setting might have been filled with boredom or irritation. Now, they just echoed the shared absurdity of trying to uphold sacred customs amid muted chaos. The prophecies and sacred voices, long blurred by centuries of tradition, seemed distant now, fleeting as the shadows cast by flickering candles. The storm gradually waned, the snow tapering to a gentle hush, leaving behind a landscape freshly coated in icy blanc. Inside the castle, a calm settled over the gathered souls, their earlier tensions softened into contemplative silence. The feast was modest, with bread, dried fruits, and warm broth shared slowly, as if savoring a rare, tranquil moment. The flickering flames cast a gentle glow over faces that wore faint smiles, not of joy, but of quiet acknowledgement that life, like the weather, often had its own indifferent rhythm. Shadows of old prophets or saints, their faces always blurred or hidden by the shifting light, seemed to watch like silent guardians over the simple scene. In this calm, the gathering found a quiet dignity, a gentle reminder that human rituals could adapt quietly to the unpredictable turns of the world. Looking back, the episode of the snowstorm and its unplanned sheltering became a subtle lesson in humility and perseverance. The sacred rite, imperfectly preserved and quietly altered, demonstrated how traditions endure not solely through grandeur or perfection, but through patience and subtle humor. The villagers and nobles, now sharing the same humble space, held a joint, unspoken understanding, perhaps just a flicker of acknowledgement that even sacred customs are woven into the unpredictable fabric of daily life. As the evening settled into a soft, reflective darkness, they returned to their routines, carrying with them a faint, warm sense of connection, fragile, unspoken, yet undeniably real. Sometimes, in the slow patience of everyday moments, history quietly watched, smiling gently at human imperfection and the simple, resilient act of gathering. On quiet evenings, when the castle's stone corridors grew still and shadows stretched long along the tapestried walls, the inhabitants gathered in the great hall, where flickering candles cast a gentle glow. It was a time marked not just by routine, but by a shared hope that something sacred might bring unity among scattered voices and wandering minds. The relic, carefully encased and seldom seen, was brought forward, its blurred visage hidden by a soft shimmer from the torchlight, as if the stone itself hesitated to reveal too much. Heartfelt prayers mingled with the faint rustling of fabric, and families paused their murmured conversations to listen, sensing that, for these few precious moments, the ordinary borders of life blurred into something sacred. Yet beneath the calm surface, a quiet tension trembled, an unspoken acknowledgement of human imperfection, woven into the ritual's fragile fabric. As the evening wore on, the gathering grew more solemn, and a soft, almost ironic seriousness settled over the proceedings. The choir began to sing, an ancient, somewhat wheezy harmony that echoed through the hall, its voices ragged but earnest, trying to reach upward like candle flames that flickered uncertainly. The priests, faces obscured by shadows, performed their steps with deliberate care, their gestures slow but unhurried, as if to remind everyone that even in sacred space, the human touch was imperfect, sometimes clumsy. Small disputes over seating or the correct posture prickled the calm like tiny sparks, only to be smothered under the weight of tradition. It was, after all, a procession of human beings trying to bridge their doubts with their devotion, often more amusing than inspiring in its earnestness. For a moment, the scene teetered between reverence and quiet irony, watching ordinary folk and clergy alike struggle to hold onto the semblance of divine order. The relic, still partially veiled, seemed both a treasured relic and a prop in this slow human theater. Children tugged at their elders' sleeves, whispering questions that went unanswered, while old-timers nodded knowingly, as if they had seen these moments unfold countless times. Somewhere, a priest's voice cracked slightly during a hymn, eliciting a faint, approving smile from the assembled. It was a reminder that even sacred rituals were not immune to the small, human foibles that made each gathering mildly humorous, more endearing than embarrassing, a testament to their shared imperfection. Gradually, the flat glare of the candles softened as a hush fell anew. A calm settled on the hall like a familiar blanket. The relic was unveiled at last, a simple object bathed in gentle light that neither dazzled nor disappointed, but simply existed. Faces glowed with warm acceptance, and the chatter eased into a tranquil silence, broken only by the soft, hymn-like hum of voices still trying to touch something beyond themselves. The feast began in a slow, unhurried manner, plates passing hand to hand in relaxed rhythm. The earlier tensions dissolved, replaced by a sense of quiet companionship, an almost mundane peace that felt more profound in its unpretentious sincerity. Here, amid the flickering candles, humanity's small, steadfast rituals quietly endured, flawed yet precious. In the end, these nights became a mirror for all human gatherings, an ordinary ceremony imbued with tender irony and gentle resilience. As the last candles burned low, casting a dim, amber hue, the castle's residents moved softly to their chambers, carrying with them the faint warmth of shared faith and minor human failings. The relic rested again behind its treacherous veil, now just a silent reminder of the fragile tensions and humble joys nestled within tradition. It was a moment of quiet reflection on how, even amidst the tension and chaos, there was always a peaceful, human rhythm, one that persisted across centuries, patiently awaiting the next quiet convergence of faith and forgetfulness. Somewhere in the shadows, the unseen faces of prophets watched a little bemused, their features forever blurred in the soft, forgiving light. As dawn broke quietly over the stone walls, the castle's interiors stirred with a gentle sense of expectancy. Candles flickered in their holders, casting soft, wavering shadows on the tapestries and wooden beams. Lady Althea, eyes half closed but calm, traced a faint line with her finger along a parchment where she sketched the new way to honor the holiday, merging old rites with gathered community customs. Outside, the distant bells tolled softly, blending with the hushed sounds of servants preparing for the day's subdued celebration. It felt like an ordinary morning, yet beneath that ordinariness hovered a quiet hope for continuity, woven through centuries of ritual and tradition. As the morning unfolded, tension emerged from the necessity of balance between the sacred and the social, between tradition and change. Brother Rowan sat at his desk, meticulously recording the details of the new merged rites, his quill moving slowly over parchment, as if reluctant to disturb the fragile harmony. The faces around him remained blurred and shadowed, figures of authority or prophets, now obscured by the soft morning light pouring through narrow windows. The kingdom was embracing this transformation with a kind of patient acceptance, unaware that even in solemn moments, a whisper of irony lingered, how humans, in their earnest efforts, often stumbled into small absurdities, even as they sought meaningful continuity. In the quiet hours, a gentle humor descended upon the scene, as small imperfections crept into the ceremony that Lady Althea had crafted. A candle sputtered unexpectedly, flickering wildly before steadying itself. A child's voice crept into a prayer, slightly out of tune, drawing a faint smile from a wary elder. The sacred figures, prophet-like, remained unseen, faces buried behind drapes of shadow, or glowing with indistinct light, almost as if humanity's longing for divine clarity was forever out of reach. Despite these moments of irony, the mood softened, settling into a calm acceptance that acknowledged human flaws as part of the enduring ritual, quietly reminding everyone that imperfection was itself a kind of sacred grace. By late morning, the official ceremonies gave way to simpler, shared moments, smiling quietly over bread and wine, exchanging fragments of stories that blurred together like the fading light outside. Lady Althea, now seated, allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible sigh, her gaze drifting over familiar faces now subtly touched with contentment. Brother Rowan closed his journal with a soft snap, as if sealing a chapter for future reference or possibly forgotten commentary. The tradition had, in its small way, woven itself into the fabric of daily life, like a gentle thread pulling the entire kingdom towards a common understanding, one that accepted its own quiet, imperfect hope amid the slow, lingering twilight of the day. In the end, the castle rested in the stillness of late afternoon, its every corner infused with a quiet reflection on the night's success. The light outside softened into hues of beige and light brown, mirroring the calm that had settled over the day. Lady Althea and Brother Rowan, now distant figures in remembered moments, quietly appreciated the subtle passage of time, knowing their work had rooted itself in the everyday, however imperfect. A distant bell echoed softly again, a reminder that tradition, like the human experience itself, was never truly finished, merely carried forward quietly into another dawn, with all its small, unassuming hopes. In the quiet stone halls of Winterkeep, Lady Aloin moved softly through the flickering candlelight, her footsteps muffled on the worn flags. She had summoned Eric, the seasoned minstrel whose reputation stretched beyond distant villages, to honor the old tradition of Christmas music, a ritual that had survived many forgotten seasons. As the noble families gathered, some with wary smiles and others with distracted eyes, the anticipation hung gently in the air like a faint dust of winter snow. The musicians, their instruments laid out with careful care, seemed to sense the solemnity of the moment, each string and windpipe waiting patiently for the first sound. Outside, the cold seeped in through the cracks, urging everyone to slow down and simply listen, as if silence itself was a quiet acknowledgement of the year's slow retreat. Just as Lady Aloin nodded to signal the start, a muted tension revealed itself in the slight tremor of Eric's hand as he reached for his lute. His face was a blur of shadows, unseen and distant, as if behind a curtain of time, while the silent instrument beside him remained oddly untouched, its neck and body shadowed in a way that hinted at unseen stories. The room seemed to hold its breath, expectant, yet waiting, while the flickering flames cast soft orange glows on faces that flickered between patience and uncertainty. In these moments, the old tradition of music felt more fragile than ever, threatened by the quiet waiting of something unspoken, something perhaps even greater than the song itself. The noble families exchanged glances, trying to suppress their curiosity as the silence deepened into a slow, deliberate pause. Then, with a slight, ironic tremor, Eric finally drew back his hand, and the room was filled not with music, but with the gentle, almost humorous realization of stillness, an awkward pause that lingered like a sip of cold wine. The lute remained silent, its surface smooth and unyielding, as if debating whether to yield to the melody or stubbornly resist. Someone chuckled softly, not out of mockery, but because the scene was quietly absurd, a renowned musician unable to proceed, a tradition paused by an unseen challenge. Lady Eloin's smile was faint, touched with a gentle irony that barely concealed her own amusement at the unintentional comedy. Somewhere in the cornerless shadows, the silent lute seemed to watch, unblinking, holding its own quiet dignity in the face of human imperfection. Gradually, the chamber's mood settled into a calm acceptance, the quiet melody of patience smoothing out the edges of the awkwardness. The noble families, half lost in their thoughts, leaned back into their cushions, while servants moved silently, tending to flickering candles and warming cups. The fear of a failed tradition melted into a soft, reflective calm, like a gentle snowfall blanketing the earth after a restless storm. Eric retrieved the silent lute, as if drawing a long, slow breath, and in the dim light, it looked almost like just another ornament, an ordinary piece of carved wood. Yet in its stillness, there was an unspoken promise that even in silence, old customs could wait patiently, speaking in the language of quiet endurance. A faint expression, perhaps one of reluctant acceptance, touched the faces of those present, unspoken acknowledgement of the slow, unhurried nature of human rituals. As the evening waned into gentle shadows, the castle's halls echoed with reflective quiet, and the mystery of the silent lute lingered softly among the walls like a shared secret. Lady Eloin, leaning back with a small, calm smile, watched her guests settle into the soft rhythm of stillness, an unintentional testament to the patience that history, like music, often required. The old tradition of Christmas music had paused, yes, but it had done so with a gentle humor, reminding everyone that even the most poised plans could be met with a quiet, unspoken challenge. The muted glow of the hearth's dying embers cast long shadows, as if even the flames acknowledged the slow, peaceful passage of time, nothing hurried, nothing forgotten. In this unremarkable silence, there was a quiet beauty, a simple, enduring truth that the stories we tell are often the ones we wait to hear unfold, in patience and quiet humor, long after the first note has been missed. As the moon rose higher over the cold stone walls of the castle, the minstrels gathered in the great hall, their instruments waiting patiently in the flickering torchlight. The air was thick with anticipation, and the faint scent of roasted meats as everyone prepared for the evening's entertainment. The fiddler, an elderly man with gentle eyes, adjusted his bow, ready to breathe life into the old songs that had once echoed happily through the corridors. There was a quiet hope that tonight's music would inspire joy, even if the musicians themselves felt only a sleepy connection to the routines of their craft. Still, amid the slow shifting shadows, the evening promised a moment of gentle human continuity amidst the encroaching winter's hush. However, as the first notes trembled from the fiddler's strings, a sudden snap shattered the fragile calm his bow, aged and delicate, had broken in two, leaving him with a hopeless silence. The room's warmth seemed to flicker and wane as the musicians exchanged glances, trying to mask their disappointment. Meanwhile, the drummer's skin tore under the unyielding tension of the rhythm, a tiny rupture that somehow felt symbolic of the entire evening unraveling. Yet more troubling still was the whispered spread of rumors, carried softly through the stone halls, that the old songs themselves were cursed, an idea planted by Sir Garrick, the rival bard, who took a quiet delight in sowing doubts. The tension grew, thick and slow, like a fog settling over what was meant to be a simple gathering. The irony of the situation lingered as Sir Garrick's rumors gained ground with a bemused, almost tired sense of irony. His words, unsubstantiated and featherlight, drifted through the air like a half-forgotten tune. The guests, their faces painted with shadows and flickering candlelight, whispered among themselves, casting sidelong glances at the musicians with a mixture of suspicion and boredom. The old songs, once familiar and comforting, now seemed tainted by the weight of unwarranted fear. The instruments lay silent or patched hastily with bits of cloth and glue, each a small testament to human imperfection and the inevitable decline of things once cherished. Even the most resolute of minstrels began to wonder if the magic in their music was slipping away, replaced by the slow, unspoken acknowledgement that some stories simply fade with time. In the quiet aftermath, the hall settled into a gentle calm. The initial upset faded into a soft, unspoken acknowledgement of the flaws inherent in their art. The musicians, now more aware of their own imperfections, swapped stories about broken bows and torn skins, their voices low and steady like the hum of a distant wind. The guests, too, found solace in the mundane reality that even the finest performers could falter, and that the old songs, regardless of rumors, remained part of the night's quiet fabric. The shadows in the corners lengthened and softened, as if accepting the ebb and flow of human effort and failure. Amid the hum of subdued chatter and the faint crackle of dying fires, a subtle sense of patience returned, reminding all present that harmony is often found in mere persistence rather than perfection. Looking back, it's clear that this small, imperfect evening quietly reflected the human condition, our attempts to preserve tradition, the folly in spreading doubts, and the gentle humor that emerges when plans unravel unexpectedly. The old instruments were eventually repaired, the rumors dissipated like mist, forgotten by morning. What remained was a calm understanding that even in our mistakes, life continues, softly, slowly, with a little irony and a lot of quiet resilience. In that gentle pause between the moments of tension and relief, there lies the true story of human music and merriment. A familiar, imperfect dance that keeps turning, even when the strings of discord resound briefly in the stillness. As the castle slipped into the quiet of night, a faint hum of anticipation filled the vast oak hall, where the oldest harp, long silent, was being gently lifted onto its stand. Servants and musicians moved softly, their shadows flickering against stone walls as they prepared for the midnight feast, a tradition as old as the fortress itself. The air was warm, but tinged with the scent of dried herbs and aging wood, a familiar scent that seemed to hold the stories of many winters past. In the midst of this slow-moving calm, the castle's inhabitants lingered in silent expectation, their eyes occasionally drifting to the flickering candles. There was no rush, only the gentle, inevitable unfolding of the evening's simple act, music, and the simple hope it would bring a moment of joy amid the everyday weariness. At the stroke of midnight, just as a servant carefully struck a dish with a spoon to gather attention, the restored instruments were brought forth, an array of quietly proud violins, a battered lute, and the buoyant rhythm of a tambourine. Yet beneath this harmony lurked the shadow of sabotage, as Sir Garrick, a wine-dark eye hidden beneath a heavy brow, subtly manipulated the strings of dissonance into the old harp's mechanism, hoping to drown out the melody or prevent the music from rising. The musicians, sensing an irregular tension, an off note, a crackling string, paused uncertainly, their hands hesitating over strings and keys. Irony hung softly in the air. What was meant as a disturbance was quietly foreshadowing something unforeseen. As the castle's long silence threatened to stay unbroken amid a quiet struggle for harmony, with a slow, almost amused reluctance, the musicians pressed on, their fingers brushing the rough textures of their instruments, unaware that Sir Garrick's meddling was about to unravel when the oldest harp, dusted with years of neglect, was suddenly tuned and allowed to resonate once more. It sounded as though the very walls listened, eager, or perhaps resigned, as chords softly rippled outward. There was a delicate irony in the effort, mere human flaws, and the silent sabotage of one man couldn't quite silence the persistent voice of music. The castle's stone chambers trembled subtly beneath the sound, as if the walls themselves remembered the forgotten magic that once dwelled within. In that quiet moment, it became clear that the real magic was not merely in the notes, but in the quiet courage of simply playing on despite the odds. Gradually, a calm settled over the hall, and the discordance softened into a gentle, embracing harmony. The instruments, now surprisingly in tune, joined in a lullaby that seemed to mingle with the castle's breathing, steady, unhurried, and strangely peaceful. The flickering candles cast a warm glow over smiling faces, some sleepy, some surprised, but all touched by the peculiar serenity that only honest, imperfect music can bring. Sir Garrick's efforts to silence the evening had faltered. Instead of chaos, there was now a gentle wakefulness, a reminder that even in neglect and quiet sabotage, there is an enduring human resilience. The castle, for a moment, held its breath, caught between the mundane and the magical, as if acknowledging the small, stubborn truth that harmony might always find its way, no matter how much it's delayed or hidden. In the calm aftermath, as the last notes drifted into the shadows, the castle's walls seemed to hold a secret smile, silent and timeless. The music lingered faintly in the cool air, a reminder that human imperfection often adds a soft layer of beauty to shared moments. The old harp, now cared for and gently tuned, sat quietly among the instruments, almost as if it too had simply remembered its purpose. The tiny victory of restored melody over sabotage offered a contemplative pause, a chance to ponder how resilience quietly weaves itself into daily life, often unnoticed, but always present. As the castle settled once more into its peaceful rhythm, the story remained one of small defiance and gentle hope, an ordinary, yet quietly meaningful celebration of persistence in the face of subtle chaos. As winter's quiet grip took hold of the castle, the familiar hum of preparations began to fill the stone corridors. Minstrels arrived with their assorted lutes, fiddles, and tambourines, their faces softly blurred by the glow of flickering candles. The chamber walls echoed with the gentle clatter of tuning strings, and the muffled voice of a singer rehearsing a tune he'd forgotten how many Christmases ago. It was an old tradition, nearly as worn as the wooden beams above, an unspoken promise that, amidst the cold and quiet, human hearts still sought songs and warmth. Somewhere in a corner, Sir Garrick, a proud knight known more for his swordplay than his sense of humor, listened with an increasingly subdued expression. The anticipation lingered softly, like the distant sound of a bell, waiting for the moment when the merriment would finally unfold. As the evening progressed, the genuine cheer grew thick in the air, yet a strange tension lurked beneath the shared laughter and spirited melodies. The minstrels, in their bright costumes, played with genuine skill, but often seemed aware, in some quiet way, of the fleeting nature of these moments. Sir Garrick, who had once declared music was for those without honor, found himself unexpectedly drawn into the chorus, his tall figure slightly swaying as he tried to follow the awkward tune. The irony was gentle, but undeniable. Here he was, a knight, humbling himself amidst the humble strings of a lute, seeking something intangible in the soundless gaps of the song. In the flickering candlelight, everyone seemed just a little more human, quietly acknowledging their shared imperfection. By the time of the last song, the room's warmth was a delicate act of balance between genuine joy and the irony of human attempt. One of the minstrels, whose face remained shadowed by a broad, familiar hat, struck a final, discordant chord, causing a ripple of soft chuckles. Sir Garrick, whose face had often been set in stern resolve, hesitated before stepping forward, clutching a simple wooden flute as if it held some sacred truth. With a sheepish shrug, he joined in, his tone rough but earnest, blending awkwardly into the chorus. The room, quietly amused, settled into a gentle silence as everyone took a breath, a small, shared recognition of the fleeting beauty of these imperfect moments. Even the shadows on the walls seemed to soften, as though acknowledging the year's quiet effort at peace and companionship. As the night deepened, the castle cooled slightly, but the spirit of the revelry persisted, now tinged with a calm that bordered on gratitude. Sir Garrick returned to his place, no longer leading or trying to command the music, but listening with a renewed, if slightly puzzled, respect. The minstrels lowered their instruments, their faces content and careworn, like tired storytellers after a long day. The faint hum of lullabies and gentle laughter lingered, drifting through stone halls and flickering firelight. The sense of tradition felt suddenly fragile, yet strangely resilient, a quiet, steady heartbeat of communal memory. Somewhere outside, snow slowly fell, softening the world into silence as everyone paused to listen to the calm after the storm of celebration. In the slow silence that followed, the castle settled into a peaceful quiet, wrapping everyone in the warm echo of shared stories and melodies. The event had been simple, no grand speeches or divine revelations, only human voices and old instruments, reminding those present that even in their fleeting moments of merriment, there was a thread of continuity. Sir Garrick, now seated quietly with a mug of spiced mead, looked on with a slight, wistful smile. The minstrels, their job gently done, packed away their instruments, leaving behind the faint scent of wax and wood as sleep crept in on the edges of their weary faces and gentle nods. The hope lingered that these fragile and often awkward traditions would carry forward, quietly making peace with each passing winter. Somewhere in the peaceful dark, the echoes of imperfect harmony drifted softly into history, waiting for next year's quiet revival. On a chilly winter morning in 1323, the stone walls of Castle Ravensbrück quietly echoed with the faint sounds of children's footsteps and the soft rustle of woolen cloaks. Lord Alaric, with his pale, unfocused eyes just beneath a brow shadowed by age, summoned Lady Elinor and Sir Rowan into the great hall, where flickering torches cast a gentle glow over wooden tables and faded banners. The air carried a faint scent of dried herbs and stale firewood as the family prepared for the Yuletide festivities that had become a modest tradition. In this slow, deliberate beginning, everyone seemed aware that the season's cheer was more of a routine than a necessity. Yet it held a fragile warmth for those within the cold stone. As the children's eyes flickered with anticipation, the centuries-old routine played on, quietly uninterrupted by the winter's approaching harshness. As the day unfolded, a tense quiet settled over the castle's bustling courtyard, where the threat of scarce supplies loomed like a faint shadow, unnoticed by many, but felt by all. Villagers and servants moved with the measured patience of those knowing winter's grip could tighten at any moment, clutching their few supplies closer and exchanging wary glances. Over the flickering fire in the kitchen, cooks whispered of dwindling grain, while the small children, oblivious to the danger, played a game of hide and seek among the barrels and wagons. Even in the midst of cheerful chatter, the weight of scarcity pressed subtly against their spirits, a reminder that safety was fragile, and the coming cold might mute the laughter altogether. Yet, amidst the quiet anxiety, the old castle endured, slow and unyielding, like a tired sentinel guarding its long history. As dusk fell, a calm settled over the castle, and the harshness of winter seemed momentarily distant from those gathered within. The flickering light cast long, soft shadows across the worn stone floors, and the low hum of quiet conversations blended with the steady crackle of the fireplace. Children and adults alike sat wrapped in thick wool, their shoulders slightly hunched against the cool, and for the moment the restless sense of scarcity seemed to soften into a kind of resigned calm. The day's tensions, woven through with irony and quiet humor, faded slowly into the background, an ordinary, sleepy tableau of life in a fortress that had seen many such winters before. Outside, the cold wind continued its slow, unchanging howl, indifferent to the small, human moments of peace within. It was enough, perhaps, in this slow universe, just to be still. Later, as the stars started to peep through narrow slits in the high windows, the castle's quiet reflection deepened. Lord Alaric, nestled in his chair, appeared both worn and thoughtful, his face blurred into shadow by the flickering light, as if half forgotten by history. The children, now sleepy and subdued, drifted nearby, their eyelids heavy with the gentle lull of a long day's quiet routines. The feast, modest and simple, lay untouched on the tables, a testament to the season's unspoken adjustments. The castle rested in a stillness that was both an end and a beginning, a moment of pause before winter's full force would return. In such moments, the human effort of gathering and giving, small and imperfect as it was, took on a quiet dignity, an acknowledgement of resilience amid the slow passage of time. And so, in the shadowed corners of the castle, life moved gently onward, like an old story softly told again. Looking back now, the first snow in the great hall seems almost like a whispered memory, a faint reminder of human endurance through the silent, inevitable winter. The laughter, the gifts, the tensions, each moment a tiny thread in the vast tapestry of time, are quietly woven into the history of the castle's long, slow story. The faces blurred by shadow, the faint scent of firewood, and the soft sounds of rest serve as a gentle testament to lives lived with gentle irony and patience. Perhaps what lingers most is not the spectacle, but the subtle poetry of everyday human imperfection, unrehearsed, imperfect, and quiet, carrying them through seasons that are always larger and slower than any one moment. And in that quiet, there is a strange comfort, the knowing that life, like the winter wind, moves on softly but surely, unhurried and eternal. As winter's chill settled softly over the stone walls of the castle, Elinor and Rowan prepared for their quiet task, eyes bright with a mixture of curiosity and the weight of tradition. The morning had been spent discreetly wandering the quiet courtyards, pockets filled with small trinkets and hurried whispers of anticipation. Their parents had merely nodded, busy with the day's simple duties, unaware of the secret game unfolding in hushed corners. Somewhere within the castle's routines, a set of silver bells, small, jingling, almost mundane, had been hidden as part of a Yuletide custom, meant to be found by children who believed in the quiet magic of the season. Elinor's fingers trembled slightly as she glimpsed the faint outline of the crypt's stone door, wondering if the bells could truly be within reach without disturbing the graveyard's gentle silence. Though the task felt ordinary, it carried the stubborn hope that small helps and shared secrets could still hold the castle's fragile spirit together. As midday slipped toward dusk, the children's search grew tense beneath the weight of their own doubts. The frost cracking under their boots seemed to echo their hesitations, echoing through the abandoned stables and shadowed chapels. They moved cautiously, eyes darting over cold stone and dark corners, voices hushed yet tinged with an undercurrent of frustration. Each step a reminder that the simple things, like bells or trust, could be just out of reach. The wind whispered through the forest, its muted howling mingling with the faint laughter of a wandering minstrel, whose partially hidden face blinked with mischief behind a hood, making it difficult to tell if they should be wary or amused. It was there, amidst the quiet chaos of searching, that Rowan wondered aloud if this game mattered beyond the thrill of secrets. Teetering just on the border of doubt about whether the castle's true survival depended on such small, fragile pursuits. The irony that a courtly tradition could feel so uncertain settled like a thin layer of snow across their youthful hopes. In the midst of their wandering, a figure appeared, softly humming a tune that seemed misplaced in the cold quiet, his face blurred by shadows and light in a way that made him seem less a person and more a fleeting thought. The minstrel's robes were threadbare, but shed a certain charm. With a slow, exaggerated bow, he offered gentle clues and humor that only hinted at misdirection. Chuckling softly as the children looked at each other with raised eyebrows, his presence underscored the quiet irony of their quest. How an outsider's playful tricks could seem more sincere than the solemn tasks expected of them. The bells remained hidden, perhaps just out of reach, or perhaps never there at all. Yet the atmosphere shifted subtly from suspicion to a quiet acknowledgement that playfulness could be as vital as precision. The children's growing doubts softened into a gentle, shared amusement that felt oddly like a small, unspoken alliance. The minstrel, a reminder that in any season, a little humor could shadow the seriousness with a faint smile. Eventually, as twilight's muted light seeped through the stained glass of the castle's smallest chapel, Elinor and Rowan paused, shoulders slackening slightly as their eyes scanned the quiet, familiar places that once comforted them. The wind outside had slowed, carrying a sense of peace that contrasted softly with their earlier frustrations. They took a moment, breath slow and steady, to reflect on their combined efforts, the quiet harmony that had begun to form despite the doubts and the odd interruptions of the wandering minstrel. The bells, still elusive, no longer seemed as critical as the shared silence and small gestures that stitched their spirits together, an unspoken understanding that their simple, imperfect quest was enough. In this calm, they recognized how fragile yet enduring the spirit of their childhood efforts could be. Even amid the quiet exhaustion that comes with knowing the holiday's true magic might be more about gentle cooperation than grand discoveries. Their quiet watchfulness shifted from expecting to appreciating the small, human moments tucked into the season's calm. Night fell softly, and the castle was cloaked in a stillness that invited gentle reflection. No bells sounded, no treasures revealed, yet the children carried away something more subtle. The patience and humor born from their small adventure. Sitting quietly beside a low fire, they listened to the distant, indistinct sounds of the castle settling into its slow, familiar rhythm. An imperfect reminder that seasonal customs, however trivial they seemed, softly stitched together the tattered edges of their world. As their eyelids grew heavy, the faint glow of burned-out candles flickered in the corners, casting shadows that moved like whispers, quietly encouraging dreams about seasons past and future. Perhaps, they thought, the real gift was not in finding the silver bells, but in the quiet bond formed through the search, fragile yet resilient, like the castle itself. Weathered but still standing, with a gentle sigh, they allowed their minds to drift toward sleep, comforted by the slow, steady truth that in small human efforts there was quiet hope for the season ahead. In the quiet hours of the Yuletide in the castle's storied halls, the children returned from their small, solemn task, with the bells dangling softly, their faces tinged with the pale glow of winter dusk. There was a gentle anticipation in the air, mingled with the satisfaction of completing a duty, however minor, under the watchful, yet blurred gaze of their parents. The pantry, however, greeted them with its near emptiness, dry bread crumbs, and a few stubborn root vegetables, reminding them that even during festive times, scarcity had its quiet place. Lord Alaric, leaning on his heavy wooden table, announced that the next task was a test of courage. To fetch a gift of fire from the ancient hearth, high within the tower. The children's eyes widened with a mixture of curiosity and trepidation, knowing well that the climb would challenge both body and spirit. As the children ascended the narrow, crumbling staircase, the cold seeped through their cloaks, anchoring each step in a shivering weight. The flickering light from their lantern danced over mossy stones and peeling wooden banisters, silently echoing the quiet decay of their surroundings. Their small hands clutched the rough stone wall, muscles tense against the stiff, weathered wood that threatened to give way. Upward, the staircase seemed to stretch endlessly, each step a fragile bridge between youthful courage and the quiet edge of danger. In that suspended moment, the weight of their parents' silent expectations nestled unspoken in their minds, folding into the cold air like a heavy, familiar blanket. Reaching the upper chamber, the children found the ancient hearth, a slab of cold, blackened stone, still faintly glowing with remnants of past fires. Iron tools lay scattered nearby, unspoken witnesses to countless winters of use. One of the children hesitated, eyeing the faint flicker of a flame buried deep within the ashes. A tiny spark of warmth amid the shadows. As they reached into the depths of the hearth, a modest irony emerged. The very symbol of warmth and comfort was now a relic, almost unreachable, leaving them with the quiet realization that some treasures required more than effort. They demanded patience. A fleeting smile flickered across their faces, caught between innocence and the subtle humor of human endurance. Climbing back down, their footsteps echo softly against the aged stone, settling into an almost meditative rhythm. The chill still clung to their exposed skin, but a quiet calm had taken hold, replacing the earlier tension. The children looked at each other, exchanging glances that carried stories of small bravery and shared uncertainty. Their legs felt the strain, yet their minds wandered to the warmth of the hall below, where a modest feast awaited, albeit one modestly prepared, in accordance with the season's modesty. The journey had become a quiet meditation on effort and expectation. Two human constants, delicately balanced in the stillness of the castle's ancient bones. Later, as dusk deepened and the castle settled into its customary silence, the children reflected on their quiet adventure. The weight of what they had faced, the cold, the crumbling stairs, their own fears, lingered like a faint ache in the back of the mind, familiar and oddly comforting. There was no grand lesson inscribed in the stone walls, only the simple truth that human effort often dwells in small, unremarked moments, woven silently into the fabric of memory. Perhaps, in their own hesitant way, they understood that life's gifts are rarely obvious. Sometimes they are the quiet courage to climb, the patience to wait, and the gentle humor to find warmth in the faintest ember. The castle's shadows grew longer, and the night stretched on, peaceful and unremarkable, as all human stories tend to be. As the winter dusk settled gently over the stone battlements, Elinor and Rowan quietly prepared the old silver bells, their small fingers pressing into the cold metal with a mix of anticipation and routine. The castle's children, bundled in rough wool cloaks, gathered near the ancient courtyard, knowing that tonight's ritual marked a rare moment of hope in a season usually overshadowed by hardship. The sky was muted, the air tinged with a faint, crisp chill that seemed to listen and wait alongside them. With a faint toll, the bells sounded through the stillness, their clear tone echoing softly against weathered stone walls. In those quiet moments, It was as if the turning wheel of history had paused, remembering that even amidst hunger, generosity lingered in small, deliberate acts. The resonant chime stirred the shadows of the night into gentle movement, as if awakening a kind of ancient goodwill that had been dormant within the castle's crumbling corners. Moments later, a faint shimmer appeared at the horizon. Traders from the neighboring valley, their wagons laden with goods muffled by snow, had listened and responded in kind. The children's eyes widened slightly with a mixture of pride and wonder, their small bodies straightening at the realization that their quiet act could summon help. Yet, beneath their composed smiles, a twinge of worry lingered, knowing that this fragile exchange might not be enough, and that hunger still gnawed beyond the castle's sturdy walls. Still, tonight, they had done their part, an earnest but imperfect gesture toward future peace. The scene shifted quietly into a quiet irony as the traders arrived, smiling tiredly under heavy wool hats, their hands rough from a day in cold markets. The children's small triumph was met with gentle, weary nods. No trumpets or grand ceremonies, just the simple exchange of salted meats, dried fruits, and small, handcrafted toys. The castle's hall echoed softly with the muted voices of traders and children, each conversation unfolding in slow, unhurried cadence. Somewhere behind the exchanged goods, the shadow of doubt persisted. The small miracle of tonight seemed almost ordinary against the background of ongoing struggle. The faint humor was that in a land torn by seasons and scarcity, sometimes a bell's toll was more a reminder of persistence than of grandeur. Beneath it all, a kind of resigned hope persisted, as unremarkable and human as the snow falling outside. As dawn crept into the sky, the castle's courtyard settled into a calm rhythm, children helping to unload the small caravan, their cheeks pink from the cold, hands busy with chores that felt both routine and significant. The bells, now silent, left only echoes that drifted unhastily into the morning air. The traders, weary but satisfied, shared lukewarm bread as they prepared to depart, each mindful of the fragile balance between scarcity and charity. For once, the peril of famine seemed to waver, if only slightly, stabilized by the quiet strength of community effort. The castle's walls, mottled with patches of moss and thyme, looked on with a patience that seemed to embody the slow, cautious tide of human perseverance. In the lingering stillness, everyone carried a shared humility, aware that the miracle was simply enduring, and that perhaps that alone was enough for now. Later, as the sun climbed higher and shadows shrank, Elinor and Rowan lingered near the silent bells, their faces blurred by the gentle light of morning, yet touched with a faint, knowing smile. The day outside was visibly ordinary people working, animals stirring, the distant sound of a wheel turning slowly. Yet, within the castle's quiet walls, a small story had quietly shifted the tides of hardship. If only for a moment, they understood that salvation often arrived in the form of tiny, imperfect acts, fleeting yet meaningful in their subtle irony. The villagers, each wrapped in their daily routines, carried the memory, perhaps a little more quietly hopeful, that beneath the weight of seasons and struggles, human kindness persisted in small, lasting ways. Somewhere in the slow unfolding of time, the recognition lingered. Every effort, no matter how modest, was part of a larger human tide turning towards resilience. In the quiet weeks leading up to the Yuletide, the castle arms children with stories and small, handcrafted tokens, simple gifts meant to foster a sense of continuity and hope. The children, their cheeks flushed with cold and excitement, gather in sunlit halls where shadows flicker against stone walls, listening to the soft crackle of fires and the gentle clinking of wooden toys. It is a time of gentle anticipation before the more boisterous festivities, where silent traditions are passed along in whispers and shared glances. These early moments, filled with modest crafts and quiet talk, seem to drift in a slow, almost sleepy rhythm, emphasizing the ordinary magic of shared histories. Perhaps it's this slow, gentle lead-up, which is often overlooked, that best captures the quiet solemnity of the season's true meaning. As the middle of Yuletide unfolds, the castle transforms into a stage for games and small contests, where children attempt to emulate the bravery and agility of their elders, sometimes with clumsy results. Laughter bubbles up at the hurried, awkward dances, while the occasional topple into hay or a puddle provokes modest apologies and faint smiles. Amidst the noise, there's an unspoken tension, a subtle reminder that these games serve as more than mere entertainments. They echo the stories of old, of knights and protectors, of winter's hardship and resilience. The highlight is often a shared gift, hand-carved wooden swords or painted charms, whose rough edges remind one of craftsmanship and imperfection alike. In that quiet chaos, the castle's children are quietly learning, each stumble and cheer stitching a thread into the fabric of collective memory. In the ironic calm after the chaos, the children sit wrapped in woolen cloaks, clutching their modest gifts as if they hold the weight of the season. The older ones, with a certain tired patience, help the younger to examine their tokens, small relics, each one a symbol of trust and tradition. The air feels cooler now, the distant chime of bells faint and monotonous, yet it resonates softly within the walls of the stone fortress. The elder lords and ladies observe from shadowed corners faces blurred by the dim light, their expressions unreadable, perhaps amused or quietly proud. The tiny gifts, simple wood, cloth, and ribbon, seem almost weightier than they are, holding stories of past Yuletides that continue to echo in the slow, steady rhythm of ordinary days. As the season begins to wane, the castle slowly resumes its quiet rhythm, fires flickering lower, voices softer, footsteps more measured. In the quiet, the children retreat into their routines, clutching their handcrafted tokens close, as if to preserve a moment of calm amid the fleeting festivities. The castle's ancient walls, worn yet steady, seem to hold their memories just as carefully as Lord Alaric, who records these small, unfolding histories in a leather-bound book. The pages fill with faint sketches of children in simple dress, of wooden swords and laughter, capturing a snapshot of the season's fleeting warmth. The story of that Yuletide, like all others, becomes part of the slow, forgetting tapestry of old stones and quiet days, where time moves as softly as the snow outside. In the end, Lord Alaric's writing ensures that future generations will remember not only the gifts exchanged or the games played, but also the simple courage of children forming traditions that survive beyond their fleeting moments. The promise whispered through the castle is that every Yuletide will echo with the faint, silver chime of bells, an understated symphony of continuity and memory. The locked away details, the rough handmade tokens, the hesitant laughter, all become quiet relics, stitched into the story of the castle's ongoing history. As the last glow of the winter sun filters through the narrow windows, the promise of another season lingers peacefully, a gentle reminder that even the smallest acts of tradition ripple quietly through time, whispering the gentle, sleepy song of human memory. Beneath the great hall of the ancient castle, Eric's lantern flickered softly as his eyes caught a faint, uneven stone seam. With cautious fingertips, he pressed and shifted the cold, weathered stones, revealing a narrow, dust-choked passage that descended into darkness. The air there was thick with silence, tinged with the scent of age and forgotten wood. It felt oddly quiet, as if the castle itself had been holding its breath. Slowly, he uncovered a small door, behind which lay a chamber untouched by time. Shelves bowed under the weight of years, and in a corner, a harried, yet surprisingly intact harp beckoned, with a promise of lost melodies. An unexpected sense of curiosity rooted him in place, despite the quiet irony that such treasures often remained hidden, waiting for someone to notice their quiet dignity. With the castle's steward by his side, Eric set about cleaning the neglected harp, softly brushing away decades of dust, while questioning whether a fragile instrument could truly sing again. The steward, whose careful hands had often mended broken things around the castle, remarked dryly that here was a relic more stubborn than most, resistant to time's relentless march. As they replaced old strings with hesitant fingers, a faint tension filled the space, a reminder that not all restorations were simple, and sometimes life chewed through best intentions with a quiet smirk. The harp, looking very tired and very out of place, seemed to resist revival more than anything human, punctuating the room's irony with a sluggish, almost bored silence. Yet in the slow process of repair, both man and instrument shared an unspoken hope that maybe, just maybe, something long lost might be found again. When the final strings finally stretched taut, a strange stillness descended, broken only by Eric's hesitant stroke of the harp strings, which gave a faint, almost sarcastic whisper. The sound was hesitant at first, wavering like a voice, unsure of itself, then slowly gaining confidence, as if remembering long-forgotten songs. The room seemed to respond, shadows flickering quietly on the walls, almost amused at the small miracle unfolding. It was as if the castle had yawningly observed its own history, amused at the idea that a piece of wood and wire could stir such gentle, ironic hope. The melodies that followed were tentative and imperfect, yet imbued with a strange dignity, a reminder that even broken things can momentarily sing with a subtle, stubborn grace. Here, amid dust and echoes, something quietly human had persisted. Persistence, imperfect but real. As the harp's soft hum settled into a lull of calming notes, Eric sat back, feeling a placid sense of quiet fulfillment. The castle's silent stones seemed to listen, perhaps remembering their own age, while the steward murmured softly that some stories, like old instruments, only reveal their worth when given patience. There was a gentle, unspoken harmony in the room, an appreciation for small, unglamorous acts of restoration, which often go unnoticed in the grander stories of kings and battles. Outside, the winter light waned, casting a muted glow over the aged wood, emphasizing the patience needed to truly listen. For a while, time seemed to settle gently in this hidden corner of history, holding back its usual rush, allowing a moment of quiet, imperfect beauty to bloom silently. In that stillness, human effort felt both inescapable and gently humorous, an enduring testament to resilience that neither needed applause nor recognition. Later, Eric would reflect on the quiet magic of that small chamber, how, beneath the imposing hall's grandeur, a forgotten harp had patiently waited for someone to notice its subtle story. The restored strings, vibrating softly through the cool air, seemed to whisper of continuity and imperfection, echoing human lives that are seldom perfectly tuned, but somehow still meaningful. The castle, seen now not as a monument of stone, but as a canvas of quiet human moments, felt strangely alive in its calm. And as night deepened outside, the memory of those tentative notes drifted into a gentle, humorous acknowledgement of history's slow, persistent heartbeat. An ordinary truth, softly sung amid the shadows of bygone days, reminding us that even the smallest acts of care can softly resonate through time's endless silence.